AITA for dumping dinner in the trash and asking my family not to stay at my place again. I, 31, am dealing with something that happened this past weekend, and I honestly don't know if I went too far or if I was justified. I could really use your thoughts. So, for context, my brother, 35M, his wife, 34F, and their two kids, 9M and 7F, were visiting me for a few days. They live in another state and wanted a short summer getaway. So, I invited them to stay with me since I have a guest room in a decent-sized house. It wasn't the most relaxing few days, but I chalked that up to having kids around. I don't have children, and I live alone, so the energy shift was intense. But whatever, it's family, right? Anyway, this happened on their last night staying with me. The visit had already been a bit trying. I work full-time, remotely, and even though I told them I had meetings and deadlines to handle during the day, they didn't really respect that boundary. They'd blast cartoons in the living room while I was in Zoom meetings, barge into my office to ask about what's for lunch, or leave the kids to wander around unsupervised while they napped or went outside. Still, I kept my cool. I even took time off here and there to show them around town. I drove them to the beach one day, took them to my favorite food truck park, and even paid for tickets to a local amusement center. I tried really hard to be a good host despite feeling worn thin by the end of it. So on their final evening, I thought I'd make a home-cooked meal, something special. My brother had mentioned earlier in the week that he missed our mom's fried fish, so I decided to make it. I don't usually fry food in the house, but I went for it this time because it felt like a nice way to close out their visit. I spent a good 2 hours preparing everything. Fish fillets, homemade slaw, seasoned fries, the works. I even bought the same spice blend our mom used to use. I didn't cut corners. I didn't throw together something lazy. I cooked from scratch, even though I had a full day of work and barely had time to breathe. My house has an open floor plan. The kitchen, dining area, and living room are essentially one big space. So as I was finishing up, I said loudly, "Dinner's ready," expecting everyone to at least start heading over. Nothing. At first, I thought maybe they didn't hear me because the TV was on. My brother was watching some football game, and the volume was cranked up. His wife was sitting on the couch with her phone volume on full blast, scrolling through Facebook videos, the kind with loud TikTok-style voiceovers and pop music. The kids were zoned in on the Switch, sitting cross-legged on the floor, completely unaware of anything happening around them. So I said it again, louder, "Guys, dinner is ready. Let's eat while it's hot." Still nothing. Not even a glance. At this point, I'm standing in my kitchen, sweaty from frying fish in the summer heat, looking at this perfect meal cooling on the table, and no one can even be bothered to acknowledge it. It didn't just feel rude. It felt insulting. I was tired. I had worked my butt off, and all I wanted was to share a meal with my family. I didn't want to make a scene, so I just made a plate for myself and sat down to eat. I figured maybe once they saw me eating, they'd come join. Nope. I sat there, chewing in silence, listening to a football announcer scream into the TV, while my brother scrolled on his phone in one hand and puffed on a vape in the other. His wife laughed at a meme on her phone. The kids started fighting over the game controllers. I finished my food and stood up. I looked around and said, as calmly as I could manage, "Is anyone going to eat? The food's getting cold." My brother stood up like I had interrupted his divine ritual and just said, "Yeah, in a minute. Gonna smoke first." And then he walked outside. His wife didn't even look up. She waved her hand at me like, "Just a sec." The kids didn't move. Didn't even pause the game. At that point, it had been 20 minutes since I first called everyone. I went back to the table, looked at the now lukewarm fish, which anyone who's ever cooked it knows doesn't reheat well, and I just snapped. I picked up every serving dish and scraped it into the trash. Every last fillet, every seasoned fry, every spoonful of coleslaw. Dumped. Tossed the paper towels over it. Took the trash bag out and walked it right to the outside bin. Slammed the lid. I walked back into the living room and said, not yelling, but firmly, "I'm not your servant. I spent hours making a meal, and not one of you could be bothered to even pause what you were doing to come to the table. That's fine. Dinner's over. I'm going to bed. I hope you had a great vacation, but please don't plan to stay at my place again." Dead silence. My brother stared at me like I'd just grown two heads. His wife blinked at me in disbelief. One of the kids whispered, "Why did Uncle throw away the food?" I didn't answer. I went to my room and shut the door. The next morning, I made myself coffee and a piece of toast. My guests shuffled around awkwardly, packing their things. No one really spoke to me. As they were leaving, my brother said, "You really didn't have to be such a jerk about it. You could have just said you were upset." I told him I did say something. Twice. I said dinner was ready. I asked if anyone was going to eat. What did he think I was doing, just talking to myself? His wife muttered something about how I was being dramatic. I didn't respond. I was too tired. I just said goodbye to the kids and shut the door. Since then, my brother's been texting me, saying I overreacted and that I embarrassed him in front of his family. He claims they were just about to come eat when I threw a tantrum. I told him that from where I stood, it looked like none of them cared. He called me petty and said it's not that deep. I reminded him that he was the one who talked about how much he missed Mom's fried fish, and then couldn't even come eat it when I made it for him. He hasn't replied since. Some mutual family members heard about it and are split. A cousin of ours says I was well within my rights, and that people need to learn how to be respectful guests. But my aunt texted me saying family is family, and that it's not worth cutting people off over something like dinner. Maybe I did let my temper get the best of me. Maybe I should have just covered the food and walked away. But in that moment, I felt completely disrespected, not just as a host, but as a person. It wasn't just about dinner. It was about being treated like I didn't matter. So, AITA for dumping the dinner in the trash and telling my family not to stay at my place again.